Hello. Hello. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We'll be beginning soon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the side event, Green Hydrogen Accelerating Net Zero Pathways, being conducted on the sidelines of the second G20 Energy Transition Working Group meeting in Gandhinagar. My name is Anurag Nalapaneni from WRI India, and I will be your MC for this evening. It's my honor to be here and along with the distinguished guests here tonight, and my pleasure to take you through today's session. Today's event is aimed at discussing the latest developments in green hydrogen with participation from various G20 nations, international research organizations, industry participants, regulatory and certification agencies. Without any further delay, I would now like to invite the esteemed members of our inaugural session to join me on the stage to begin today's proceedings. I would like to now invite Mr. Bhupinder Singh Bhulla, Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Mr. Kenichi Yokohama, Director General, Asian Development Bank. Mr. Dinesh Jagdale, Joint Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Ms. Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General, International Renewable Energy Agency, and Ms. Suman Sharma, Managing Director, Solar Energy Corporation of India. As per Indian tradition, we would like to begin the event with a ceremonial lighting of the lamp. May I please request Mr. Bhupinder Singh Bhulla, Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, along with the distinguished members of the panel, to light the lamp and proceed with the event. And to begin with the inaugural session, may I please request Mr. Dinesh Jagdale, Joint Secretary, MNRE, to present the opening remarks to kickstart today's discussions.
Thank you, Anurag. Very good, warm welcome to all of you. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Solar Energy Corporation of India, International Solar Alliance, and the partners ADB and WRI, it's my proud pleasure to welcome you all on this first side event. Actually, we are having on the sidelines of the Energy Transition Working Group, which is happening. This is an important topic for all of us, and I thank you for coming out in numbers and going to deliberate on most of the important topics that we feel are critical for us to move in the hydrogen economy, as we all say. For hydrogen to make a substantial impact, the world needs to rapidly scale up its production via sustainable pathways. And the ultimate long-term objective is now to ensure widespread availability and the affordability of hydrogen from renewable sources. Realization of this aim would be challenging and thus necessitate closer alignment and deeper engagement among the G20 and amongst all nations as we collectively collaborate on this green hydrogen aspect. So without taking much due, I just wanted to set the tone that this side event is actually going to deliberate. We have very esteemed dignitaries, and we have a lot of panel members who are going to deliberate on various aspects, which also will include the collaborative efforts that we as collective world, as the G20 mantra says, that how can we now put in efforts and ensure that there is harmony in the approach, in the definition, in the standards, codes, regulations, and the trade, which obviously has to happen between countries to ensure that it is a global net zero goal that we want to achieve, rather than limiting into one particular country. Obviously, India has taken leaps and bounds in terms of the way we have progressed on renewable energy capacity additions, and shown the way and shown the leadership in our setting up the tone that the entire world is now looking towards India as a country to also now embark on this greener pathways, which is called green hydrogen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir, for setting the context for today's discussions and deliberations. I now invite Ms. Suman Sharma, Managing Director, Solar Energy Corporation of India, to share her views on powering green hydrogen through renewables.
Thank you so much. Shri Bhupender Singh Bhalla, sir, Honorable MNRE Secretary, other esteemed speakers on the dais, the members of the Energy Transition Group present here, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, it is indeed a privilege and pleasure for me to be at this stage of the side event of Energy Transition Working Group under India's G20 presidency. As our G20 Sherpa, Amitabh Kant sir has said, India is ambitious, inclusive, action-oriented to take the green development and the sustainable development goal agenda forward. And I do believe sincerely that the panel discussions which will be happening on this platform today definitely embody this intent. Green hydrogen, as we all know, has emerged as one of the most vital component of this energy transition chain, especially in the hard-to-abate sectors, industrial sectors, then long-haul mobility, then heavy transport, of course, including aviation and shipping, and renewable energy storage. Energy storage is definitely one area where hydrogen plays a very important role, and also in the process heat industry. So we can see that green hydrogen is definitely going to play a very, very crucial role in the entire energy transition chain, not only in the power sector, but also in the other energy related sectors as well. SECI, most of you might be knowing, but some may not know, this Solar Energy Corporation of India, the organization which I represent standing here, this was incorporated in the year 2011, and this was mainly tasked with taking the solar mission, initially the National Solar Mission of India forward, but as we grew, the other portfolios kept on adding to our basket, like wind energy, biomass, waste to energy. So presently, though the name still stands as Solar Energy Corporation of India, but actually this encompasses all forms of renewable energy sources except the large hydro projects. In our journey of over this decade, we have been able to have within our portfolio around 48 gigawatts of renewable energy projects, and SECI takes pride in associating with this energy transition working group. And with our portfolio, with our experience, I think we are very suitably poised to address the green aspect in the green hydrogen mission or the green hydrogen value chain. As we all know, to make green hydrogen cost effective, the major thrust has to be on the cost of the renewable energy source, because that forms the major component of the integrated green hydrogen value chain. SECI has been able in India to drastically reduce renewable energy tariffs, especially in the last 6 to 7 years. And today, India can proudly claim that the renewable energy cost in India is probably the lowest across the globe. So that makes it very clear that India is definitely one of the most attractive destination as far as the investments in the renewable energy sector stands. SECI has done a wonderful job as far as National Solar Mission was concerned. We were the main aggregator. And with this National Hydrogen Mission in pipeline, we do hope and we do sincerely believe that we should be able to replicate the same success even in the green hydrogen mission as well, and would emerge as the biggest aggregator for the green hydrogen in India. We have been discussing with the different kind of sectors for green hydrogen, like steel, fertilizer, refineries. So different kind of models are emerging as we engage more and more with our stakeholders. There are some who just want pure RE. So there we can supply the third party sale renewable energy to them. Some of them want to have their own electrolyzers. We can supply RE for their electrolyzers. There are other models where they want the entire aggregation at our end. Basically, they want green hydrogen at their doorsteps. So there we can play the role of the aggregator. So we are preparing ourselves with all the possible models, all the possible demands the procurers might have, all the possible roles the procurers might want us to play. So we are engaging with them in consultation. We are quite cognizant of the is Roger showing time to me? Okay, so I didn't know that. I'll quickly finish then. So we are quite conscious of all the across the globe happening events in the hydrogen, like HINTCO and others, and we are learning different processes, or different geographies they have taken, and we would be trying to incorporate all those learnings in our procurement drives, which will be taking very recently. With this, I just wish all the panelists here and all the discussions here will be very fruitful for taking this green hydrogen mission forward. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for highlighting the key role of SECI and renewable energy for accelerating the transition to a green hydrogen economy. May I now call upon Ms. Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General, International Renewable Agency, to share her views on green hydrogen, a global perspective.
Good afternoon. Secretary MNRE Shri Bhallaji, all the dignitaries on the dais, and all the esteemed guests for the function today. First of all, let me thank MNRE for giving IRENA the opportunity to present our views. All of us are aware about the race to net zero, and that's the huge political momentum that's been built around by all the major economies who have put out very clearly when they would be achieving the net zero. In addition, I think all of you are also aware about the 1.5 degree scenario, and that the window for that 1.5 degree increase in temperature rise is actually closing very fast. So with green hydrogen, I think there's another race to 1.5 that has started, which is really the race to ensure that green hydrogen is available at $1.5 per kilo, and that's the new race that's building this huge momentum around green hydrogen. So I just want to put out a few numbers before I get into specifically more thoughts on green hydrogen. IRENA comes out with a flagship publication which is called the World Energy Transition Outlook, and we basically model our scenarios on the 1.5 degree scenario. And according to this, we estimate that the electrification, the global electrification, is set to rise from the current 21% to move to over 50%. And that basically means that the electricity generation will need to treble. So it's about 20,000 terawatt hours right now, which we expect will rise to about 70,000 terawatt hours. And within that, we expect that 90% of it by 2050 will come from renewables. Now, within the total final energy mix that we are expecting to shape and the energy transition to happen, the expectation is that hydrogen will have a 12% share in this, and 2/3 of it will be green hydrogen. So that may not tell you much because it's just a number, but I do want to spend a minute just telling you the scale of what we are talking about when we talk about green hydrogen. Right now, globally, about 100 million tons of hydrogen gets produced, and it's not, it adds to the emission because it's mostly coming from fossil fuels. So it's not currently, 98% of it comes from fossil fuels. And if we are to move into the kind of green hydrogen economy that we are talking about, we are looking at scaling this to almost 6 times. And to be able to do that, the amount of electricity and the amount of renewable energy that will be needed is nearly as much as what the world consumes as a whole today, which is about 21,000 terawatt hours. So it's a huge economy that we are looking at building, a huge ecosystem that we are looking at building to be able to get green hydrogen, to look at the hard to abate sectors, and to be able to transform economies in the way that very few other technologies have been able to do. So I want to just leave you with 3 thoughts. The first being that right now we think that although many countries have come out with their strategies for green hydrogen, but the focus on supply side is much more. We think that unless you can have a good off-taker risk getting mitigated, the kind of growth that we are anticipating will not happen. And that's something that EU very recently, and it's been a very exciting last week when we had, coming out, the EU came out with how they're going to align their regulations and create a very large market for bringing in a huge demand for green hydrogen. The second thing is that this is clearly going to be an opportunity to industrialize and to make the structural changes in industrialized countries to be able to bring in a very different way that industry can move forward. And I think that's a huge opportunity that needs to be also picked up and built into the policy framework. And
by incorporating the green hydrogen to expand the supply hours. Other areas of the possible use includes the industrial processes, the power fuel cells for vehicles such as forklifts, and public transport such as railways and bus systems. In moving forward, however, enabling role of the government remains a key in advancing green hydrogen production. There's a need for establishing clear and appropriate standards for and regulation applicable to the production, storage, sales, and transportation of green hydrogen, as well as economic incentives. Further, government needs to provide a viability gap financing at this moment on concessional loan facilities so that the private sector can generate outputs at hydrogen outputs at comparable price with other technologies. So likewise, given the high cost of technology, there's a substantial need for international cooperation for knowledge exchange, advancing and promoting technological development. ADB will be glad to work with the Indian government, other developing member countries, and international partners to work for the advancement of the green hydrogen utilization, including equity, debt, guarantee, and technical assistance, with the exploration of concessional facilities needed for their commercial exploration in the future. So we have technical assistance resources available to advance this technology, as well as exploring immediate and medium-term investment opportunities, also doing the necessary financial structuring, attracting concessional financing, as well as exploring grant financing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for highlighting the pathways, the financing pathways for the transition to green hydrogen. May I now invite Honorable Secretary Bhupender Singh Bhalla, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, to present the keynote address for today's gathering.
Good afternoon, all the dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us in this session. This is on green hydrogen and accelerating the net zero pathways. That's the topic of our side event. Well, I'm sure you would agree that we are amidst an unprecedented global energy transition. Nearly all major economies have pledged to achieve net zero targets and have embarked on a path of accelerated deployment of renewable energy sources. Green hydrogen, as has already been mentioned, has emerged as a promising pathway for meeting the decarbonization goals, especially in the hard-to-abate sectors. I think that is key, because we often have a query on people who do not know that why are you pursuing green hydrogen, and I think we have to explain that is largely for the hard-to-abate sectors. Probably it can be done much faster or maybe better in the other sectors as well. And these hard-to-abate sectors are in industry and transportation, and largely long-haul transportation. India too has announced an ambitious energy and transmission emissions targets. We are installing 500 gigawatt of non-fossil electricity capacity by 2030. We want to be energy independent by 2047. We want to be net zero by 2070. Going forward, we feel that green hydrogen will be a key component of our strategy to achieve these goals. Accordingly, in January this year, Government of India has taken a landmark decision by approving and launching the National Green Hydrogen Mission. This aims to position India as a leader in the global clean energy transition. As far as the mission is concerned, I mean, most of you might have read about it. We aim to establish a green hydrogen ecosystem in India by creating demand, strengthening the supply side, and focusing on policy and regulatory frameworks, innovation and affordability. By 2030, that's the target. The mission targets to achieve at least 5 million metric tons of annual green hydrogen capacity, production capacity in the country. And of course, this will come along with the associated renewable energy capacity of about 125 gigawatt. This scale of requirement is expected to bring over US $100 billion in total investments and generate employment for over 600,000 people in the country. However, we recognize that commercializing and scaling up the green hydrogen in various sectors requires multiple interventions. You heard these speakers before me. Technologies need to improve, costs need to be brought down, scale of projects need to be expanded, standards need to be harmonized, and investments need a clear roadmap for offtake. While each of our countries is making individual efforts on all these areas, collaborations could accelerate the transition substantially. Our G20 nations possess complementary strengths in terms of natural resources, institutional capacities, technologies, potential offtake, and the internal supply chains. We feel that partnerships can leverage these complementary strengths for achieving the collective targets in a swift, decisive, and resource-efficient manner. Under India's presidency, we are proposing deepening of engagement among the G20 countries on some of the crucial enablers of the green hydrogen ecosystem. For guests who were not there in the meeting in the morning, in the G20 meeting, we were having these discussions on hydrogen. We have proposed that countries should work together to quickly arrive at common framework for certifying hydrogen produced from various pathways. This will be crucial for boosting the trade and enabling the development of a sustainable and transparent global market for green hydrogen. Second, the importance of global free trade supported by resilient supply chains is emphasized. Third, cooperation on research and innovation to accelerate the technology development cycle would be of utmost importance, I think, for all of us. And we must deepen the R&D engagements among the institutions and industry. Fourth, a clear outlook for financing hydrogen would be the most crucial for projects to take off. Therefore, we propose to work together to mobilize investments across the hydrogen value chain. The fifth proposal is to establish an institutional mechanism to take forward some of these cooperation efforts. The Global Hydrogen Innovation Center, which we propose to be virtual, will serve as a platform for global dialogue, knowledge exchange, innovation, and capacity building. We are very happy to note that these proposals received wide support from G20 member countries based on the feedback, and we had a lot of discussion, the delegates would recall. Based on the feedback, we would be working to develop these proposals into more concrete action plans. This event on the sidelines of the G20 Energy Transitions Working Group will serve as a platform for experts, policymakers, academia, and think tanks to share the knowledge and experiences on the potential of hydrogen. We are, in India, we have just started the process. We just announced it in January, and now we are entered April, so just 3 months. And the kind of the kind of broad way in which we've been had to work on implementing the mission, and makes us realize there's such a long way to go. We've just started, we just initiated some of the steps, and then you realize the scale of what needs to be done, the kind of a task, the mammoth task which lies ahead. But I think I think something, we've started, and I'm sure we'll do well, and we will achieve the target that we've set for ourselves. And I'm sure most of the countries have announced their own targets, their own pathways, and everybody is on track in some way or the other to the pathway that they have chosen. I think today's side event, when we were selecting the subject for this event, we wanted to make sure that it kind of matches with the general, importance that the G20 countries and other countries are giving to the energy transitions. And we thought hydrogen is one of the key enablers to do that, and that's the reason we selected this topic for discussion. I hope that today's deliberations will generate ideas for furthering the international engagements towards widespread adoption of green hydrogen. Thank you, and look forward to the deliberations today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable insights and guidance on making the best of today's discussions. That brings us to the final part of the inaugural session. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a short presentation by Dr. Guncha Munjal, Manager, Hydrogen WRI India, to present key recommendations to enable the global hydrogen transition.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be talking about green hydrogen accelerating net zero pathways. So, rapid and deep reductions in CO2 emissions are necessary to address the problem of climate change. For this, more than 100 countries, which covers around 90% of global GDP, have already announced their net zero targets, and around 44 hydrogen strategies, policies and roadmaps has been announced so far. Green hydrogen not only ensures the decarbonization, but it also helps energy security and self-sufficiency. For this, in this presentation, we will talk about two important things. One, electrolyzer as a technology, as electrolyzers powered by renewable energy sources produces clean hydrogen, which is important, which plays an important role in the complete hydrogen value chain. And another thing which we will talk about is standard definition of green hydrogen. So before we talk about the different things, let's talk about the global hydrogen and electrolyzer demand. Here we have developed two important scenarios. One is base case scenarios, which we consider as all the announcements for hydrogen come true by 2050, and for aggressive case, the developments for achieving all the net zero targets announced by countries. So in the base case, in year 2021, the hydrogen demand was around 94 MMT, and it is going to increase to around 348 in 2050 for base case, and if we take aggressive case, it will around 520. Similarly, if we look at the electrolyzer demand projections, for base case it was around 2021 in 2021 it was around 8 gigawatt per year, and it is going to raise to 235 gigawatt per year in 2050, and if we take the case of aggressive development, it will be around 400 gigawatt per year. Now, as we talk about the electrolyzers, we have 5 important things to note about the technology gaps which are presently there. First one is the supply chain constraint. So 90% of the platinum group metals has been focused in one area which is supposed to be changed. Then the R&D for the low cost development of non-noble metals supposed to take place, and then also for domestic electrolyzer manufacturing policy and initiatives should around. The second point is intermittent supply of renewable energy, which can create operational breakdown and affect the electrolyzer performance. Combining battery storage systems are presently used in certain projects. The third point is around design challenges, which may vary from different types of electrolyzers. For example, in alkaline electrolyzers, when operated at the part load, they suffer a problem of purity of hydrogen. The other problem is related to large-scale deployment, which involves the huge investment risk, demand uncertainty, module size, and material availability. Then the requirement of water, around 18 to 25 kg liters of water is required to produce per kg of hydrogen. If we are able to make electrolyzer which can use seawater, it will be very beneficial. Then the another part which we'll be talking about on the standardization framework for classification of green hydrogen. Well, we need to define green hydrogen for coming up for transparent, robust, sustainable and global market for green hydrogen. A clear understanding on production pathways, system boundaries and emission threshold will help in adopting the globally accepted mechanism for certification. We need a transparent and cost-effective tracking mechanism also for compliance. Some ongoing initiatives are listed here, which are like this. And finally, the key recommendation, which is first one is enhancing the collaborative research and innovation. Next one is establishing robust and diverse supply chain, and the policy initiative in which a synchronized effort from government and industry will enable the demand visibility and fast track the access to funding. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the detailed insights. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings a close to our inaugural session, and we now move to the next session of today's agenda. Before that, I request colleagues from SECI to present mementos to all the esteemed panelists. May I also request the panelists to please stand for a final group photo before you leave. Ladies and gentlemen, we now move on to our plenary session where we have a host of experts from industry, academia, research organizations presenting the latest developments across the hydrogen ecosystem. As a gentle reminder to all presentations, to keep the event on time, we have allocated 8 minutes for your presentations. My colleague will flash a 1-minute warning, at which point you may begin your final remarks. To begin the plenary session, I would now like to call upon stage Dr. Ashish Lele, Director, CSIR National Chemical Laboratories. Ms. Petra Schwager, Chief Climate Technology Partnerships Division, UNIDO. Mr. Matthew Jez, Director, Asia for HDF Energy. Mr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance. And to set the context and summarize today's discussion, Mr. Madhav Pai, CEO, WRI India. I would now like to invite Mr. Madhav Pai, CEO, WRI India, to set the dais for the plenary session.
Thanks, Anurag. Again, we're very happy as WRI India to support MNRE to organize this event in partnership with SECI and NISA. A lot has been said. I think the context was set by the previous panel. I'll just say 2 or 3 things. And I think one that, it's very clear that green hydrogen, early studies suggest has the potential to contribute more than 20% to the sort of reduction in global emissions by 2050, right? So the potential is huge, almost 7 gigatons of CO2 annually. And it's very clear that it's a huge opportunity for hard to abate sectors, and we need a lot more sort of collaboration, especially on the technology side, on the standard side, for us to sort of move very rapidly on the green hydrogen pathway, as Secretary mentioned. We also heard there are about 700 sort of green hydrogen, 700 large-scale sort of hydrogen projects announced globally, but we also heard from ADB that only 4% are actually just sort of moving forward, right? So again, there's a huge opportunity for collaboration, for deliberation, for conversations. This side event is one of those attempts. We have a host of experts here. So really, I think, really identifying basically, how to really look at the supply chain issues, harmonize standards, and of course, really drive more and more global cooperation on R&D. And I think on that side also really, I think it's a huge opportunity for the G20 countries to see how we can do more collaborative action through project development, through financing, and R&D development. So with that, basically really, this is an opportunity. It's the beginning of one of the opportunities to start talking and sort of charting that path to accelerating this green development, green hydrogen pathway to tackle sort of the larger change of climate change that we are all sort of fighting towards. So with that, let's hear from the experts, and I'll hand it over back to Anurag.
Thank you, sir, for setting the tone forward for the plenary session. We hope for an extremely engaging and insightful presentations ahead. With that, I would now like to take the opportunity to invite Dr. Ashish Lele, Director CSIR National Chemical Laboratories, to present on his theme, Research and Innovation to Achieve Net Zero Goals.
Thank you very much. I'd like to appreciate and thank MNRE for hosting this event and for inviting me. I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to get started right away. I'm going to talk about the need for research and innovation in ensuring the scale-up and sustainability of green hydrogen value chains. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm not going to spend any time on this. We know that climate change is the major driver for hydrogen. Hydrogen is a sector coupling agent. We talked about use of hydrogen for carbon abatement in difficult sectors, but also the current events globally that have caused dramatic rises in natural gas prices, disruption in supply chains are all the important events that are pushing the green hydrogen acceleration across the world. As some speakers have already mentioned, there are a large number of hydrogen roadmaps available by most countries. And India also created the green hydrogen, the National Green Hydrogen Mission document, which was launched earlier this year. And we are it's a very nice document that has many initiatives that are listed here, as well as some key enabling decisions that hopefully will accelerate green hydrogen deployment in India. And as also was mentioned earlier, while there are a large number of projects that have been announced globally, only a few have really reached investment decisions. The numbers are really a little dated here. Instead of 500 plus numbers, it's now 700 plus numbers. And the percentage of actual deployment, the investments have come down from 10% a year ago to about 4% now. So there's a clear gap between what has been announced and what has been deployed, and there are many reasons for it. And one of the reasons is the fact that R&D innovations are absolutely critical to make investors put in more money with enthusiasm into deployment of green hydrogen projects. And in my opinion, there are these several things that research and innovation would play an important role in accelerating green hydrogen. Improving the efficiencies of hydrogen technologies, reducing the capex of hydrogen electrolyzers, fuel cells, and other systems, reduce the dependencies of critical materials, as we heard about, continuous improvement in technologies. For countries like India, for example, leveraging this small and medium scale sector where much of these development is going to get kick-started initially is very important. The harmonization of regulation standards and codes, I think R&D plays a very, very big role in making sure that the right calculations are done for life cycle analysis, and also establishing testing protocols, and finally and most importantly also, or equally importantly, also to make sure that skilling of manpower is done, because that is very critical to large scale deployment of green hydrogen. Just to give you an example, if you look at the levelized cost of hydrogen by electrolysis, the number $3 per kilowatt, $3 per kg, comes by reducing the renewable electricity prices, and also making sure that you have access to clean funds and low cost of capital. But if you want to really go to the aspirational targets of $1.5 per kg or even $1 per kg, factors such as capex reduction, efficiency improvements become very, very critical. And this is where R&D plays a very important role. So for example, there are a large number of disruptive innovations that have appeared very recently. For example, the colleague formerly mentioned seawater electrolysis. And for a country like India, which has 7,600 kilometers of coast, and also a problem of getting clean water required for electrolysis internally within the country, seawater electrolysis can play a very, very big role. And these kinds of disruptive innovations are going to be very critical for green hydrogen deployment. There are other such important things that happen. For example, good membranes for electrolysis improve the efficiency of electrolyzers. If you look at storage, and these are some rough numbers of how much it would take to store and transport hydrogen for about 400 kilometers from the point of origin to the point of usage, you would see that the cost of hydrogen storage and distribution exceeds $1 per kg. And we think a good number is less than $1 per kg. So clearly a lot of R&D innovations are required to bring down the numbers. For example, the capex of carbon fiber cylinders, which are today the most important technology for storing hydrogen, the cost of carbon fibers has to come down from today's $25 a kg to less than $10 per kg. There are other technologies which are very important. The LOHC, for example, or the metal hydrides, especially the high entropy alloys, are emerging technologies which will drive down the cost for hydrogen storage. At least that is the hope, and that is where the recent R&D efforts are showing us. Last part of the hydrogen value chain is the hydrogen utilization, and as everybody has said, the long haul and heavy duty transportation is where hydrogen might make a big difference everywhere in the world. And again, the cost of fuel cells, the reduction in critical materials like platinum, these things will come only through disruptive R&D. And there's some phenomenal science that is happening showing how the amount of hydrogen that goes inside a fuel cell can actually now be the same amount of hydrogen that goes in a catalytic converter, for example, in a SUV. And therefore, that dramatic reduction in the use of platinum and other such metals is a critical factor for large-scale deployment of hydrogen. And there are many such very nice innovations that are coming up, and I think are going to be very, very important for improving the confidence of investors to put in money into large-scale deployment of hydrogen. I come from an institution where hydrogen has technology development has happened over the past 15 years or so. We have reached points where we can today make large stacks that can go into cars or buses. These are vehicles that we have developed along with our industry partner in CSIR. The efficiencies of fuel cells have increased dramatically for us over the last 10 years or so, and some very nice advanced material developments have happened which we think can bring down the cost of hydrogen and fuel cells. More importantly, we are also doing rigorous the life cycle analysis, and we hope that some of our labs and our co-workers get involved in India's effort to calculate the carbon emissions associated with various pathways for green hydrogen production. Here is an example of green hydrogen production through a biorefinery route. I'm going to skip some of that. These are pilots that we have shown for various parts of the hydrogen economy. And finally, I think the way we are looking at this is looking at R&D as three parts: mission mode projects, grand challenge projects, and blue skies projects. And I think investments from government and private sector are critical to make sure that R&D happens and is accelerated in all of these three parts of projects. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir, for your detailed insights into the role of research and innovation to achieve climate goals and net zero targets, and also elaborating on India's current ongoing research. May I now take the opportunity to invite Ms. Petra Schwager, Chief Climate and Technology Partnerships Division, UNIDO, to present her views on advancing global standards and certification schemes.
Thank you. Time is running. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a big pleasure to be here. Let me just get right into the subject. As part of our mandate at UNIDO, which is aligned with SDG 9, driving an inclusive and sustainable industrial development, we launched a global program and partnership for hydrogen industry, and especially to bring forward an inclusive hydrogen transition that is also looking at environment and social aspects, but also driving this forward, and especially working on the key enablers that we heard already during the day. It's policies, standards, finance, skills, innovation, and coordination. So let's look where we are standing. What really drives the hydrogen economy? And this is something that I'm waking up and going to sleep for the last 2 years now. And one issue is certainly that we have to look into how we drive the demand also at the local level. So where the hydrogen is produced in developing countries, because this is where we have the biggest efficiency of using green hydrogen. And through this, steer a new pathway of innovation, like was said before by Irina. And this could be a big game changer for the global south. Then secondly, we have to of course enable a transparent global trade system, and you see here how many new trade routes for hydrogen are already being established. And as we stand here, more than 50 countries have developed or are developing hydrogen standards. But we need reliable systems. What is happening today? We have voluntary and mandatory standards. Voluntary set by organizations like standard making organizations or also NGOs, whatever you name it, and then we have mandatory ones. And you see, but these schemes are all working with a different framework, addressing different subjects. We also had a lot of discussions, especially this morning, on the colors. So what we see, and you see here, the colors are telling you where the energy comes from, and then the CO2 content tells you what is embedded in these different ways of how you produce hydrogen. So what we need is an objectively measurement of the CO2 content in hydrogen, and there is also a need to be transparent where the hydrogen comes from, and this should be paired. So along the hydrogen value chain, we have to measure the CO2 emissions. So that means from the energy production side up until the usage. And it's not one or the other. We have to, the CO2 emissions are going to be added up. So one part is how much do I need for the production, the conversion, the transportation, and then the utilization. It's not an easy undertaking. Then also we should look into what is the water that we are using per kilogram of hydrogen produced. What are the jobs that we are creating? What is the land use that we are talking about? So quite a number of issues that need to be considered for a sustainable hydrogen economy. We need to decarbonize by 2050, or eventually even before, and for this we need to bring the CO2 content down to less than 1 equivalent to CO2 emissions. So this is, and if you see here on the standards that are at the moment valid, we have only one mandatory standard or definition, which is the one from the EU, which has recently been announced, the famous RED II, which looks into renewable hydrogen production. Then we have the famous, also the US. I'm sorry, there is no, that's fine, yeah. And you see that the CO2 content that is that have to be met in this standard varies between the different standards. With UNIDO, we have teamed up with ISO. We have a long-standing cooperation with ISO to develop a global standard, and the first part will focus on the production of hydrogen, and we will look into the CO2 content. And here you see the time frame. My colleague just came back from the from the meeting in March in Grenoble, where we set the next steps. The idea is, or the plan is, that by November we have a methodology on how you and agreed upon methodology how to measure CO2 content in hydrogen, because you cannot have a standard unless you're not agreeing on the methodology on how to measure this. This will then be followed by accounting methodologies for transportation and utilization. Again, not an easy undertaking. At the same time, there are also standards for for ammonia production and so on being developed. What is our recommendations here after all this work? We have to align and mutually recognize the metrics. If you don't agree on how we measure it, which standard to apply, global trade will be very difficult to achieve, because we don't know what we get for what we pay for. Agree on the measurement of the environmental benefits of hydrogen, but also if you want to think further on the social impacts, on the environmental impacts, this will be also work that UNID is undertaking for the next COP on the SDG, on the impact of hydrogen on the different SDGs. Key element is also what I mentioned already for hydrogen production, conditioning, transportation, and application. We need to also consider the source of origin, and that will be a big challenge, because if we concentrate mainly on the CO2 equivalent, that does not tell you where the energy comes from that is embedded in the hydrogen you're producing. And for India, that is voting for green hydrogen and has a big focus on green hydrogen, that is something that needs to be discussed. This is a prime product that needs to be addressed. And nations should be careful by adopting standards into their national regulation, because you first need to know, is this really a recognized standard? We have seen there are a lot of voluntary standards out there. I mean, this is also how people are making their money, but we have to be careful what we are applying, what countries are applying and adopting in their national regulations. Last, a few words on the UNIDO-ISO collaboration. For years, as I mentioned before, we have been collaborating with ISO, and especially on enabling developing countries to first be part of the discussions. At the last discussions, no single developing country was participating, so we need the voice of the Global South to participate in standard making. Then how do we build up the national capacities to comply with the standards? How do we train people that are verifying the standards, that are certifying at national level? So this is a big work that we are undertaking together. And then also to advising countries on the benefits of advantages, what I just mentioned, on making reference to global standards and making sure that they are applying the right standards. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here.
Thank you, ma'am, for highlighting the need to advance global standards and certification mechanisms to enable the transition to a green hydrogen economy. I would now like to call upon Mr. Matthew Jez, Director, HDF Energy, to present on large green hydrogen project development.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Mathieu. As you can hear, I'm French. I represent a French company here, HDF Energy. We are developer and IPP of hydrogen projects. I will try to bring a different angle to what was mentioned earlier. And our principal target is to explain how we can make hydrogen happen today, not in 1 decade or two, but really today. This is a picture of the applications on hydrogen, which sectors it can cover, and the beauty of hydrogen is the versatility. With hydrogen, basically, you can decarbonize all sectors. But this is also a challenge. When we talk about hydrogen, what are we talking about? Mobility, power, heat, chemical sector, and that sometimes is confusing. When we talk about the challenges, we often mention the price and the development of infrastructures, but all sectors, they don't face the same challenges. So on our side, we believe we need to focus first on the power application, because in the right context, we can make the project economically viable. And I believe the main challenges of developing green hydrogen are related to the price and the development of infrastructure. Those topics can be addressed. It was mentioned earlier, but we see that there is a clear momentum around hydrogen through a lot of subsidies in Europe, Australia, Japan. Real projects are coming. The suppliers are scaling up their capability. So the price will go down. It's just a question of price and time. However, I believe we need to make a distinction between developed countries and developing countries. While France, for example, is feeding the market with 8 or 9 billion euros of subsidies, I'm not sure that all countries can do that worldwide. And in developing countries, we need to focus where hydrogen don't need subsidies. And there are some sectors where we don't need subsidies, and I will explain that. We believe the power application do not need subsidies in a certain niche market. And we develop, for example, what we call renewable power plants in order to tackle the intermittency of renewable energies. As you know, solar and wind are intermittent. And when you have a lot of intermittent power into the grid, it will lead to issues for the utility. And on the left side, you can see how intermittent it is. On the right side, you can see how stable it can be through hydrogen storage. And basically, to make that happen, we will combine several items, renewable energies, batteries, and hydrogen in order to deliver to the grid firm, stable power. By manufacturing the hydrogen locally, we will be able to tackle the logistic issues. We won't have to transport the hydrogen. We will do everything on site. So basically, we will oversize a PV plant. With the oversize, we will feed the batteries, but also the electrolyzers. We will store the hydrogen, and on night, hydrogen will become electricity through a fuel cell. And basically, with that approach, we can feed the grid day and night with stable power. So that is the concept. In reality, we are building this project in France. So this is in France, but a remote area of France in French Guyana, so between Brazil and Suriname. The grid is large, but not that large. It's like 400 megawatt capacity, but it's not big enough to integrate a lot of solar and wind over there because you cannot diversify your grid enough, and hence the instability will lead to blackout, voltage issues, and so on. So we developed there renewable power plants. It made financial close, and it's under construction. We have commercial banks involved, like SMBC or BNP Paribas. But the beauty of these projects is to show that we can implement commercial scale hydrogen projects from today by addressing the right context. And we can do it because at the end of the day, we don't sell hydrogen. No one cares in this project if it's $2, $4, $10 per kilogram. We sell kilowatt hour. So if we have a bankable PPA, we do have a bankable green hydrogen project. And the hydrogen is used as a storage component. So now our ambition in Asia is to duplicate this project. I lead our development in Asia region. We are present in 7 countries. I'm based in Indonesia, and you will understand on the next slides why. But we are also based in India, where we believe such projects can work. So a few words on our milestones in Asia. In Indonesia, first, you just need to open the map to understand why we focus on this country. There are many islands, many grids. They are not interconnected. It's very unlikely that they will be interconnected. So anything at the east of Bali is a potential for HDF because the cost of electricity is high, the development of logistic infrastructure is complicated. The integration of renewable energies also because of the intermittency. And we are developing over there a pipeline of 20 projects. Supported by US DFC, so maybe there is a representative of US government here. We thank them very much. And our first project is called Sumba. And on Sumba also we had a lot of development agencies involved. ADB, for example, public sector helped the Ministry of Energy by doing some studies over there. So that is just a first example on how we are bringing hydrogen to Asia today again, not in 10 or 20 years, really today. Secondly, in Philippines, in Mindanao, almost equivalent to Indonesia, large country, a lot of isolated grids, and Mindanao is really the edge of Philippines in the south. We are developing over there a pipeline of projects also to tackle the access of electricity, to tackle the impact of intermittency to the grid. So same spirit somehow than Indonesia, but in a different context. A few words on South Africa, because I believe we can make a lot of analogy, South Africa, India, and somehow Indonesia also. There is a strong utility there, ESCOM, a huge dependence to coal, like in India and Indonesia. And there is this program called the JET under Progress that we try to accompany by implementing a partnership with ESCOM over thousands of land to develop PV and hydrogen storage. So on the past slides, I tried to demonstrate different contexts, different countries where we can make green hydrogen happen, how it can bring a learning curve to those countries. And last but not least, I want to mention how you can help those projects to move forward and help the industry. I do believe that both the government and development institutions have a huge role to play. Firstly, the development agencies, they can bring technical assistance. I think it was mentioned earlier, but they can bring also concessional loan to reduce the cost of electricity and hydrogen. And last but not least, the government, they can be open-minded in the way they look at their current regulation. We cannot wait for new regulation to come to be developed because it can take years. So this is all I like to say today, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your company's expertise with us on developing large-scale green hydrogen projects. I now invite Mr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance, to present his thoughts on the G20 Green Hydrogen Hub.
Thank you very much. I think we've already we have reached the stage where all of us realize that hydrogen is important. It is a key enabler for achieving global climate targets, particularly in the hard-to-abate sectors. The important thing is that the hydrogen should, over a period of time, come from renewable sources of energy, which makes it green hydrogen. Last year, the G20 members, G7 members launched the Hydrogen Action Pact, and its objectives included enhancing joint action on hydrogen and its derivatives. One of the agreed items of HAP, the Hydrogen Action Pact, is the acceleration of low carbon and RE sourced hydrogen with emphasis on hard and abate sectors. And at ISA, we are particularly interested, we are mainly interested in the renewable energy sourced hydrogen. Now, last year, the global demand for hydrogen was about 94 million tons, 96 million tons, somebody said. And this is growing at about 5% a year. I think that is the important point to note. But this accounts for less than 1% of green hydrogen today. As a percentage of the total energy production, green hydrogen is only 1% of the hydrogen production. The vast bulk is made from gas, the reformation of gas, and used in the refinery and the fertilizer sectors. We have a long way to go. And the primary issue is the issue of cost. Solar electricity to electrolysis of water to green hydrogen costs somewhere in the vicinity of $5 a kilo. That from the reformation of natural gas costs about $2 a kilo. So there is a large price difference that, apart from the public policy based approaches, that is needed. Now, as was mentioned earlier, several countries have already announced roadmaps and strategies for a green hydrogen economy. And while this emerging technology is gaining traction across various sectors, it faces various challenges, including obviously the shortage of manpower, but also more importantly, an idea of what is happening where. what is the kind of infrastructure? People talk of those 400 or 600 projects. What are those projects about? Where is action happening? Where is action not happening? And if I as a country need to move ahead with a green hydrogen policy, what do I need to do? Now, we at the International Solar Alliance have been working on hydrogen for quite some time. And how do I move ahead? Yeah. And one of the key issues I think that we need to focus on is providing support to our 115 members on country level insights on how to move ahead with green hydrogen. This is important because, as has been said again and again, we are talking of utilization of hydrogen, we are talking of production of hydrogen, we are talking of trade for hydrogen. And this implies that a large number of parameters have to be considered in the ongoing studies as far as country studies are concerned, which would help, therefore, in the countries themselves in preparing a readiness framework on how to go ahead. We have also been working on a number of studies. The second study was launched in collaboration with the European Investment Bank and the African Union at the last COP, and focused on the green hydrogen potential in 4 African hubs: Mauritania, Morocco, Southern Africa, and Egypt. These reports are now available on our website. Now, as far as G20 is concerned, I think the key issue is for us to partner with G20 on how do we create a center, a virtual center where we can capture all the information that is on the many, many things that are happening on hydrogen, and bring together the entire energy community, both on the demand side and on the supply side, the policymakers, the financing community, as has been mentioned. For us, the 3 key issues are knowledge dissemination, best practices in learning, and to involve all networks and partners. Now, as we move ahead, the key issue is how do we capture all of this? And therefore, we are looking at a range of providing a range of services through this center, and developing a portal. And this tells you, I mean, I don't go into the detail, but it tells you on how we are moving ahead on doing it. The second phase is almost done. We are now putting in content from various sources onto the portal. These are some of the shots that you see as we move ahead. This is what the contents look like. And therefore, what we hope is that this provides all of us with a way in which we can move together. Obviously, this will be done in close coordination. The national coordinators of the participating governments and the relevant stakeholders across the green hydrogen value chain. We look forward to partnerships. This is about enabling partnerships. And one of the key issues here is how do we enable every person to be able to access what they want on this website. The website is content heavy, and therefore a huge amount of effort has gone into preparing an artificial intelligence-based chatbot, which helps you as a user to navigate and find the information that you want. So if you want information on various production technologies, on utilization technologies in a particular sector, that can be done. I want to express my gratitude to MNRE, the G20 presidency, on whose invitation we are here. I also want to thank the Asian Development Bank for the support that we have had in preparing this web portal. I look forward to all of us joining together to help move green hydrogen forward far more rapidly than even the rapid pace that we have seen in the past few years. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, sir, for showcasing how the G20 can leverage working together for creating a global hydrogen ecosystem. I would now like to invite Mr. Madhav Pai to present the closing remarks for the plenary session with a brief summary.
I'll do a quick job on summarizing the conversations. But essentially, I think 3 or 4 things clearly emerged. Dr. Lele talked about sort of one, the opportunity in innovation on various technologies. He mentioned a few like metal hydrides, membranes, but clearly a huge potential on technology innovation. And so a clear roadmap and a plan for that. He sort of laid out the idea of mission-led projects, Grand Challenge and Blue Sky technologies, but I think clearly sort of a huge opportunity for technology. And then sort of he talked about the work on life cycle carbon emissions, which was further sort of re-emphasized by Ms. Petra, and the partnership with ISO that is being developed, the fact that by November there's going to be a methodology where we can measure the CO2 content. So I think clearly that is a big area that is required as we start to do sort of more collaboration, also sort of moving from just voluntary markets to knowing what are the mandatory markets, how can we use standard ways in which we can measure across countries, across projects, etc. She also briefly mentioned about both the sort of environmental impacts that are, and others also touched upon it, beyond just CO2 but water and other aspects of it, and also the huge sort of economic opportunity in jobs and skill development. We saw the sort of renewable power plants from France. Mr. Matteo also briefly touched upon the $8 to $9 billion subsidy that France is creating for green hydrogen, and which may not be as easily available for the developing countries. And so again, the opportunity for collaboration and learning from each other. And this is where I think ISA's role in creating this virtual center, that will make all of this sort of knowledge available to 100+ countries, to be able to really, drive and move us along this path, green hydrogen pathway towards sort of climate change mitigation. So with that, I'd stop and hand it over back to you.
Thank you, sir, for concisely putting together the key highlights of the session. I am sure many of us must have found some key takeaways from all the presentations. May I now request the panelists to accept a small token or small memento as a token of our appreciation. A group photo, please. And we now move to the final session of today's event, a panel discussion focused on collaboration opportunities among the G20 nations. In this panel discussion, we are hoping to witness focused deliberations on potential opportunities that the G20 nations must leverage to foster and develop collaborations amongst each other to enable hydrogen adoption. I would now like to call upon stage Mr. Ajay Yadav, Joint Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India. Mr. Takuma Otaki, Advisor to Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, Government of Japan. Mr. Brian Madhawe, Head of Energy Efficiency, International Energy Agency. And Mr. Dylan M. Jones, Office Director and Energy Attaché, Department of Energy, US Embassy. Before we get into the discussion, I request the panelists to please present their views and request them to keep their interventions short to 5 minutes. I would now like to start with Mr. Takuma Otaki from the Government of Japan to make his initial comments. Mr. Otaki, if you would like to make your comments, please. Yeah. You can do it from here. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. So, good afternoon, namaste. To all distinguished guests, thank you so much for giving me such an honorable opportunity for making a presentation. I plan to briefly introduce our Japanese hydrogen policy and showcase our actions to install various hydrogen techs in our society for seeking more collaboration from each other as a friendly countries. Okay. So at the first, our Prime Minister set the 2050 carbon neutral goal declaration and positioned hydrogen as one of the priority areas in the green growth strategy, and aim to expect the volume of hydrogen interaction to achieve cost reduction through the government support, including green innovation funds. And regarding the supply side hydrogen, we have been leading demonstration renewable energy-based project at the Fukushima project, 10 megawatt alkaline electrolyzer in operation since 2020. And the Yamanashi project, 16 megawatt PEM type of the electrolyzer is also in operation, aiming to improve operation efficiency to reduce the cost. Thank you. And I would like to emphasize that we have already started to develop many projects on demand side of hydrogen, not only focusing on the hydrogen electrolyzer, and launched various demonstration projects in transportation sector for formulating the global supply chain of hydrogen. And of course, we recognize that ammonia is one of the promising hydrogen carriers, so we are developing various discussions. And we know that India is also very focusing on ammonia areas. But on the other hand, from the perspective for utilizing the ammonia as a power source, we understand that we need to get more awareness about the effectiveness of ammonia as a transition energy resource. So we have collaborated with IEA for analyzing potential of ammonia as a transition fuel. Also formulating the supply ammonia chain is crucial. So we are discussing with many countries for further developing ammonia supply chain. And as you know, we are we are living on car industry for a long time. So almost all discussions are started from car industry. And currently approximately 7,600 FCVs have been sold and 180 hydrogen refueling stations is installed already. And the FC trucks and the FC trains are under demonstration. And hydrogen and ammonia is also used for, now this is a demonstration phase, but try to apply to the vessels also. And we are also install some hydrogen tanks to power sector. Sorry for quick instruction. And not only for gas hydrogen co-firing, but also we are developing ammonia co-firing technology. And we are now trying to applicate such kind of technology to India also. And finally, personally, I believe that utilization in hydrogen in industrial sector is a key factor for achieving carbon neutrality in various countries. We are dedicated to our trials to decarbonization of various sectors like steels and others. We need to deepen our trials for utilizing chemical characteristics of hydrogen. And lastly, I skip this slide. And I finally, this January, we materialized that remarks for very simple, the schemes for promoting Japanese entity to import clean hydrogen and ammonia from other nations by filling the gaps, price gaps. So my quick three messages. The first is that we are open to discussion with all countries to form an international hydrogen supply chain and are ready to discuss it. And the second is that we are very open to discussing the development and harmonization of regulations, including safety regulations and business regulations, as well as joint demonstration project with various countries. And lastly, is that we are not all interested in discussing of the color of hydrogen, which is barely valued in definition. Regarding the last point, we believe that from the scientific standpoint, we should focusing on carbon intensity and promote efficiency and realistic use of hydrogen, even if hydrogen is labeled by whom and as what color. So I will stop my presentation here, and thank you so much for hearing that. I would like to seek more collaboration to various countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I would now request Mr. Dylan Jones from the Department of Energy, USA, to make his comments.
Sorry, I had a printing problem, so I have to read my notes from here. Which one is the forward? Oh. Okay. First of all, I'd like to say the picture that was presented with my name at the beginning, that wasn't actually me, but he was a lot more handsome, so I'd like to request that you just please leave that photo and use it in the future, but the name is correct. I'm Dylan Jones. I'm from the Department of Energy. I'm our energy attaché at the Embassy in New Delhi. I'd like my thanks to the moderator, Mr. Secretary, and good afternoon to my distinguished colleagues from near and far. I'm honored to speak with you briefly about the Department of Energy Hydrogen Program on behalf of my colleagues who are based in Washington, D.C. I'll give a brief overview of the program and our broader hydrogen context, and then speak to our international collaborations in this area. I'll mention in advance that our slides contain a plethora of information. I won't be covering every detail, but I'm happy to share a copy afterwards. So President Biden has laid out the boldest climate agenda in our nation's history, one that will require robust collaboration across the federal government, the 50 states, and the private sector. And it will rely on the power of science and innovation at a scale that the world has never seen before. Clean hydrogen will play an important role in tackling hard to decarbonize sectors such as medium and heavy duty transportation and metals and chemicals production. Cost is, as many have noted before, cost is the main barrier to deploy clean hydrogen across the United States. Additional challenges include lack of hydrogen infrastructure, lack of manufacturing at scale, as well as durability, reliability, and availability challenges in the supply base across the entire value chain. The DOE Hydrogen Program, through cross-office coordination led by the Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies Office, is working to address key clean hydrogen research, development, demonstration, and deployment, or RDD&D barriers, and to unlock hydrogen's potential to decarbonize multiple sectors in our economy, create economic opportunities that lift up communities, and support climate goals. Today, approximately 10 million metric tons of hydrogen are produced in the U.S. each year, mostly from natural gas for uses such as ammonia production and oil refining. The draft DOE National Clean Hydrogen Strategy and Roadmap identifies growing opportunities and expectations for annual domestic clean hydrogen production at 10 million metric tons by 2030, 20 MMT by 2040, and 50 MMT by 2050. Historic investments in clean hydrogen, including $9.5 billion from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BIL, and clean hydrogen production tax incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act, will also turbocharge efforts to make clean hydrogen accessible for all Americans. The BIL includes $8 billion for regional clean hydrogen hubs, $1 billion for clean hydrogen electrolysis program, and $500 million for clean hydrogen manufacturing and recycling initiatives, accelerating our progress towards decarbonization. So DOE has made $7 billion available for regional clean hydrogen hubs and another $750 million of BIL funding. That includes electrolyzer manufacturing research and demonstration. These BIL activities directly support the DOE hydrogen shot to enable $1 per kilogram of clean hydrogen within a decade. So as required in the BIL, DOE developed a national clean hydrogen strategy and roadmap, and in the spirit of collaboration and transparency, DOE released a draft for stakeholder and congressional feedback before finalizing this year. The strategy covers the entire hydrogen value chain from production to storage, applications, and more. So the draft strategy and roadmap identifies 3 key strategies to ensure that clean hydrogen is developed and adopted as an effective decarbonization tool. 1, target strategic high-impact uses for clean hydrogen, which will ensure that clean hydrogen will be utilized in the highest benefit applications. 2, reduce the cost of clean hydrogen by catalyzing innovation and scale, stimulating private sector investments, and developing the clean hydrogen supply chain. And 3, focus on regional networks with large-scale clean hydrogen production and end use in close proximity. DOE has made $7 billion available for regional clean hydrogen hubs, as I mentioned before, and these activities directly support the hydrogen shot. So I've referred to that a couple times. It's to get hydrogen down to $1 per kilogram within a decade. Clean hydrogen. Through collaborative initiatives such as the DOE Hydrogen Shot, H2 at Scale, and the recently launched H2 Hubs, the DOE Hydrogen Program is engaging with stakeholders across the country to target strategic high-impact uses for clean hydrogen, reduce the cost of technologies, and focus on regional networks to drive the scale of clean hydrogen applications while creating economic opportunities for American communities. So DOE's Hydrogen Program is committed to developing technology that can enable a clean hydrogen transition in the U.S. and acknowledges the importance of collaboration both within DOE and its stakeholders in industry, academia, and the states to achieve that goal. Oops. Sorry about that. Global interest in hydrogen is increasing. As has been stated here, over 30 countries to date have released hydrogen roadmaps in industry and have announced more than 520 global scale hydrogen projects representing $160 billion in funding. As my colleague noted earlier, those figures are now even higher. DOE engages in multiple international collaboration platforms spanning more than 20 countries to accelerate global hydrogen progress. This, of course, includes the Clean Energy Ministerial, or SEM, and Mission Innovation, MI. These platforms are doing great work. There's a whole lot listed here I don't have time to go through, but I like to emphasize in the international collaboration arena that we want to continue leveraging the existing platforms, such as IPHE, SEM, MI, and to avoid duplication of efforts. Listed a few key India-US hydrogen collaborations here. I won't go into them for time. The International Partnership for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells in the Economy, or IPHE, national lab engagements, including here in Gandhinagar, and of course the US-India Hydrogen Task Force. Here are a few more upcoming engagements. And with that, I will conclude our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I now request Mr. Ajay Yadav, Joint Secretary, MNRE, Government of India, to make his initial comments.
Good afternoon to all. So I'll be making a small presentation on National Green Hydrogen Mission. So this is the country's energy strategy. So by 2030, we expect to reach 500 gigawatt of non-fossil capacity. 50% of the installed capacity will be from non-fossil fuels. And we target to reduce emission intensity of GDP to 45% to below its 2005 levels. By year 2047, we expect to reach energy independence, and our goal is to reach net zero by 2070. So the Government of India launched National Green Hydrogen Mission in January this year. It has an outlay of $2.4 billion US. So there are two aspects, the demand side and the supply side. So first, I'll take the production side, because as we know, in the longer term, the cost of electrolyzers, the cost of renewable energy, the cost of energy storage systems is all expected to come down. But the real challenges lie in the shorter duration. So it's here where when the industry needs the government support. So we have provided under the mission direct financial incentive for manufacturing of electrolyzers and production of green hydrogen. The total outlay under this strategic intervention for green hydrogen transition, that is the SIDE program, is $2.1 billion US. As far as demand is concerned, so currently we have a production of 5 million metric tons of gray hydrogen. Most of it is produced in refineries and fertilizers production. So we expect that these two sectors will be the biggest off-takers for the green hydrogen. And in addition, there will be new sectors like steel, like shipping and mobility, where we are also funding pilot projects. So once these pilot projects, they become successful, then they will be scaled up. And these are some of the new sectors. We are also looking at aviation sector and city gas distribution as well. In addition, we expect that there will be a lot of international opportunities for India to participate in. So export markets also provide an opportunity. So there are some of the key enablers for success of National Green Hydrogen Mission. The resources, the renewable energies contribute to 65 to 70% of the cost of green hydrogen production. So the overall transmission, banking, storage are the aspects we are working on. In fact, we have presently 160 gigawatt of green energy, of renewable energy production currently, and around 160 to 170 gigawatt. So, and we are fourth largest in the world, and in fact the rate of expansion of renewable energy in India is one of the highest. In year 2014, we had solar energy production of 2.6 gigawatt, and now it's almost 63 gigawatt, a jump of 25 times in 8 years. Infrastructure and supply chain issues will be the key. So in addition to ports, then we will have to have pipelines for transportation and hydrogen storage hubs. So we'll be working on these. Research and development in all aspects of the value chain, starting from electrolyzers to storage to transportation, will play a key role. And our research programs are also included as a part of our National Green Hydrogen Mission. And public-private partnership is expected to play a big role in this. Regulations and standards, we are working on it, and we have set up a working group. We already have identified the regulation and standard that we need to notify, and also certification of green hydrogen. So ease of doing business is another aspect, that we will having simpler procedures for taxation, SEZ, commercial issues, and we will also be having a single window clearance for these green hydrogen projects. So new kind of skill set will be required. For this, we will coordinating with the Ministry of Skills and Ministry of Education for creating that skill set. So these are the expected deliverables by 2030. So we will have 5 million metric tons of annual production of green hydrogen. We'll be adding 60 to 100 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity. We'll have 125 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity. In addition to this, we'll have to have the transmission network associated to it. We'll be creating 600,000 of green jobs, and the total investment that's expected is USD $100 billion, and it will avert 50 million metric tons of CO2 emissions annually. So thank you. That was in a nutshell our National Green Hydrogen Strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now invite Mr. Brian Madhave from IEA to present his views.
Thank you and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, so thank you to the organisers for the invitation, but of course to the Government of India for this excellent G20 event and all that goes with it. And I must say, we remember well, we had the honor of writing the first hydrogen plan for G20 in 2019, and the environment was so different then for hydrogen. It's great to see the progress that has been made and the real change in tone. And I think particularly the step up with it we're seeing this year is very much to India's credit and to MNRE in particular. Congratulations on how you're taking hydrogen forward so successfully at the G20, but also domestically, as we see from the National Green Hydrogen Plan, which is very impressive indeed. So I just want to make a couple of quick points about international collaboration from the way we see it. We see a lot of potential for growth in the short term for green hydrogen and for low emission hydrogen. I won't go into the details except to reiterate two numbers we've heard during this event, which I think remind us of the challenge ahead of us. The first number is 1%. So less than 1% of the hydrogen produced today is green or low emissions. And I think that just reminds us as a starting point. And the other number is 4%. So of all the projects we see announced or conceptualized or in development phase for clean hydrogen, only 4% of them are either at final investment decision or development stage. So we're reminded that there's this huge emerging potential for clean hydrogen and for green hydrogen, but we still need to see the action. We still need to see those commitments to investment and implementation and the kind of range of enabling policies that we've just heard from the Joint Secretary that will enable that to happen. I think it's also great to see the G20 conversation focusing on international trade for hydrogen. I think this will be a really important element. And again, our analysis shows that we could be seeing as much as 12 million tons traded by the end of this decade of clean hydrogen in a range of economies right across the world. Having said that, to make the same point, we see those announcements, we see those ideas, but not in every case do we see the policies, the takeoff contracts, the full arrangements, the infrastructure in place. And again, I was pleased to see the focus on ports, infrastructure, other structural dimensions here in India, but of course there are other business model dimensions as well, and elements relating to the regulations, the trading rules, and of course standards and all of that we're talking about as well in this event. So I just want to really put in front of you 4 policy considerations from our perspective that may be worth thinking about in the context of international collaboration on hydrogen. The first is we need to move from announcements to policy implementation. I've made the point. We need to see more action, more investment, more firm progress. I think the potential is there, and we're looking forward to seeing a real acceleration in that. I think as well, let's not forget to focus on the demand side, which a point has already been made once or twice, that we talk a lot about production, but the sector will be driven by demand for green hydrogen, and that's where investment confidence will come, that's where markets will emerge, that's where money will strengthen. So let's see a focus on the demand side. Equally, trade by definition implies international collaboration, so there's plenty of scope there for more collaboration on setting the conditions for trade, both physically and in terms of business models, regulation, and all that goes with it. And finally, of course, a focus on the development of infrastructure. From our point of view in the IEA, we're delighted to be working with all of the countries involved in G20 and well beyond. We're very pleased, for instance, to be working with the government of Japan, looking at standards at the moment right now in the context of the G7 presidency, which I think will be very interesting for the G20 discussions as well. And we, of course, look forward to continuing to be involved in all of the really interesting initiatives that are emerging out of the conversations today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now finally moving to the panel discussion for today, I'd now like to hand over to the moderator for the session, Mr. Madhav Pai, CEO, WRI India. Over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Anurag. Let's quickly sort of dive into some questions, and then maybe we can take, engage the audience and take 1 or 2 questions also at the end. But maybe we'll start with Mr. Start with Mr. Otaki first, if you don't mind. It was a great presentation. I was just curious if, what are some of the priority sectors that, we need to target for green hydrogen utilization according to Japan? I mean, what is your prior experience in this area?
Yeah, thank you so much for a great question. So we are, try to focus on various sectors like India, steel, and HDBs. And of course, we are, again, car industrial country. So we are now trying to focusing on how can we decarbonize the factory by utilizing the chemical characteristics of hydrogen, because hydrogen has a storage characteristics, and hydrogen can generate a high temperature heat. So we recognize such kind of characteristic and utilize it for decarbonization of the processing of the industries.
I just one more question to you before we move. Japan also talks about sort of procuring hydrogen from overseas as part of your transition to clean energy. So just any sort of, can you elaborate on it, policy incentives, any other initiatives around this?
Yeah, thank you so much. And sorry for I'm missing my presentation. We are started to incentivize the Japanese entities to import from overseas, import hydrogen from other countries for filling the gaps between the fossil fuel or authentic fuels and some new fuels like ammonia or hydrogen something. By filling the gaps, price gaps, we try to import from overseas, like for facilitate the utilization of the clean energies, clean hydrogen or others.
Thank you. So, Mr. Dillon, over to you. You talked about sort of the big $10 billion investment, but just, can you talk about sort of the if you can give some suggestions about, certain policy initiatives, other measures you've taken to drive large-scale deployment of green hydrogen in the US and outside?
Sure, thanks for the question. I'll have to defer some of my answer a little bit longer as I'm standing in for one of my colleagues who drafted this presentation. They can speak to some of the specifics, but I can tell you that some of the funding that we've injected already has, particularly into the R&D section or area, has enabled over 1,200 patents and 30 commercial technologies in the market in hydrogen production, delivery, storage, and fuel cell technologies. So by investing in that sort of R&D, it allows the industry to go further forward, utilizing those new technologies. So that's one way we've been able to invest in it. We've also done some cost sharing with industry. I give a specific example, the deployment of approximately 700 forklifts nearly 2 decades ago, and now we have over 50,000 forklifts being operated using clean hydrogen at major company warehouses. Those are a couple of examples.
Just one more question to you before. You talked about the IRA and the BIL, but also can you talk a little bit about how, especially you want to stimulate sort of collaboration with other nations around green hydrogen, and what sort of initiatives might there be?
Yeah, sure. So unfortunately, I ran low on my time at my slide, but there are a number of initiatives that are currently underway, and we have a few. I wish I had my slides pulling up, the ideas for the future.
Maybe you can just speak about them without me.
Sure. Just pull it up here. So one of them I mentioned is we have a variety of national labs in the United States that are operated by the Department of Energy, and they do a lot of cutting-edge research in a variety of areas, including green hydrogen. And so we have a couple of engagements, and one I mentioned briefly. For example, Sandia National Lab works directly with the Indian Institute of Technology here in Gandhinagar. It has visiting student and collaboration visits on metal boride nanostructures for hydrogen storage and generation. Opportunity for the future is join the Center for Hydrogen Safety and participate in sharing and training resources. Focus R&D by sharing data on hydrogen and fuel cell applications, including transportation and infrastructure, through another national lab project, the NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory Composite Data Products. Those are a couple ways in which we're currently engaging internationally and ways we can collaborate in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Yadav, maybe you talked about the National Mission on Green Hydrogen, but maybe can you talk a little bit about the importance of regulation, codes, standards, and how both with the G20 presidency and beyond, how can we foster that further?
Regulations, codes, and standards, it's one of the, in fact, I would say one of the most critical components of this whole ecosystem. because it is required not only from the viewpoint of safety and security aspects, but also from the aspect of international trade. In India, we are having a working group on regulations, codes and standards. It's chaired by the Secretary MNRE. The working group had its meetings, and they have also submitted their reports. So they have submitted reports on the production side, on the storage side, as well as on the consumption side and application side. So now these standards will be notified after following due procedure by the Bureau of Indian Standards or the PESO. In fact, as far as G20 is concerned, so we are having discussions. This was the point today as well in the priority 5. So having a common set of standards, codes, regulations and certifications will be very important for global trade, free trade of green hydrogen. Thank you.
So one question to you, Brian. I mean, maybe, I don't know if you, only if you can, maybe, we talked a lot about economic impacts and job development. I mean, does IEA have any sort of projections on what kind of jobs green hydrogen will create? And, and also sort of this whole, the fact that, this will also take away some fossil fuel jobs. Any thoughts on sort of, any projections, any numbers, and, both how do we think about this from a just transition perspective in addition to sort of the skill development perspectives?
Broadly speaking. Yes, I just needed to turn it on. Okay. Jobs is a sensitive issue in all parts of clean energy transitions, because we can say from our analysis that clean energy transitions globally will create more than 10 million more jobs than will be lost in the transition. But that's not of great comfort to a particular individual or community who feels, exposed to changes that are happening in their sector or in their technology. One of the great advantages of hydrogen is in terms of maybe sectors that feel vulnerable, whether it's coal, oil or gas in different parts of the world, there's a greater degree of skill transferability to hydrogen than there is in other sectors. Sometimes you get people working in the fossil fuel sector saying, don't tell me that I can become a solar panel person or an IT person or something like that. But I know that some countries are, one of the reasons why they're very focused on hydrogen is because of the transferability of their own skill sets. So resources in terms of the energy resources, but also resources in terms of the human resources. And of course skills then becomes a key dimension that governments are proactive. And again, I was very pleased to see it in the typology of what's being focused on here in India, to think that if those jobs are, if people are going to benefit from those jobs to the maximum amount, if local populations are, if they're going to be well paid, good quality jobs with the right skills, governments should be acting now. So I think it's really important to focus on that. Hydrogen is a real opportunity for job creation, but it's also an opportunity for job redeployment and reskilling of other workforces that maybe won't benefit so much out of clean energy transitions.
Thank you. Can maybe one or two questions, maybe we'll take 2 or 3 questions from the audience, then we can do one round of closing remarks and end the panel. So, yeah, please. Maybe you can start. Yeah.
There has been so much talk of production of green hydrogen from electrolysis. But I don't hear anything about production of hydrogen from biomass. And why can't the international collaboration lead to not only collaborative research, but also pilot or demonstration projects? These are important for all the global south.
So there's a question there as well. So maybe.
Yes. Can I ask?
Please.
Yeah. So we heard that the NEOM project in Saudi Arabia has been financially closed for $7.5 billion. Can we have some information on what is the offtake agreement? Can anybody give on that?
There was a question here, and then we can.
My question is Japanese regarding this liquid hydrogen. What is the pressure and temperature you are maintaining for the liquefaction of the hydrogens?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Xiaodong Wang from the World Bank. I want to make a quick comment and a question. First, I congratulate government India to issue this national green hydrogen mission. And at the request of the government India, we are actually now preparing a potential $3 billion program, mainly to support this national green hydrogen mission, as well as the renewable energy that is critical to produce the green hydrogen. My question is that I think the IEA already mentioned the critical need to create a demand. I think we all talk about the supply side and this and that. So I wonder for Japan and US, what's the measures put into place to actually create a market demand? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Maybe should we just respond to these 4 questions? There's one on biomass use, one on the NEON project, if anybody is able to answer. If you can't, it's perfectly fine. Then there's the question on liquefied hydrogen that, direct, and the 4th question on demand. So maybe, do you want to start, sir?
As far as the biomass is concerned, it is part of our national green hydrogen mission. It's an important component. And our mission, when we talk of incentivizing production of hydrogen, so it involves production of hydrogen from electrolysis as well as production of hydrogen using biomass. We in our country have enough biomass maybe for production of 7 to 10 million metric tons of hydrogen. And in fact, we are also supporting some projects, some research in Indian Institute of Science is doing some research on use of biomass for production of hydrogen. So we will be supporting the biomass aspect as well. And we'll be supporting not only through the incentivization of production, but also in the case of research and development for biomass. Thank you.
Mr. Taki, do you want to answer the question?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for questions from the. That is, we need to keep the temperature on minus around 260 or 253, with a pressure 1.3 megapascal was some answer. And the key technology which we have is we have developed vessels for delivering such kind of liquefied hydrogen. That is kind of very cutting edge technology. So we're now trying to make it larger scale for delivering liquefied hydrogen from other countries to my country, our countries. Yeah, that is my answers to you. And one more question from the man. We try to reach out to make demand of hydrogen from both sides. Both sides means the supplies, incentivized side and regulation side. We put a bunch of money for making a demonstration project for developing a cutting-edge hydrogen technology like a co-firing system or some other vessels, fuel cells. And not only making an incentive scheme, but also we are now trying to discuss developing regulation schemes for making a mandatory to some high-emission industries. So now the details is now under discussion, but we are trying to make a demand for hydrogen, such like approach.
And I'd just like to add on to that last question. Honestly, we're doing very, very similar things on the U.S. side to try and improve the technologies that are existing and look for new ones. As I mentioned, we're injecting a lot of funding into electrolyzer manufacturing research and demonstration, and everything to try and support our hydrogen shot that I mentioned, because we believe that if we can help get that cost just down to where it can be more competitive, that's when the market demand will really, really kick into high gear. And again, along the way, we're helping with a lot of funding and these different initiatives within developing our hydrogen hubs and technology demonstrations, et cetera.
Thank you. So, I think maybe we can, if you have any closing remarks, maybe, and then we can sort of wrap up the panel. Anything from you?
I think the future for hydrogen is very bright, and I commend India for taking this leadership domestically, but also globally. I think we'll look back on 2023 as a key moment. So really just looking forward to continuing to engage with everybody on that golden future. Thank you.
So, in my view, countries all across the globe, have come out with their own green hydrogen strategies. So, international collaboration will be one of the key aspects, and setting up of regulations, standards, certification criteria, and knowledge exchange platforms that we should pursue. Thank you.
Okay, we are very serious to dedicate to promoting and collaborate with all other countries. So thank you so much for having this opportunity.
I'd just like to say that it's really comforting to see that so many countries around the world are investing heavily in this sector to try and bring us to a more competitive, a spot where green hydrogen can be more competitive. And regardless of what we're doing in our own countries, I think the international collaboration that we have and moving forward is going to be critical, because any gains in this area in terms of technology improvements will ultimately benefit all of us and the industry itself. So I think that's very promising, and hope we all keep after it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's do a round of applause for the panel. Thank you for the insightful conversation. Thank you.
I would like to thank all the panelists for the deeply thought-provoking discussions and expert insights into enabling G20 nations and the rest of the world transition to a green hydrogen economy. And thanks to the moderator, Mr. Madhav Pai, for guiding the discussion in such an engaging manner. Before we close, just a note, there is a hydrogen-powered truck on display at the venue right next to the area where we had lunch. If you have not seen it, please do take the opportunity to go view the exhibit. I would now request that we share a token of appreciation through a small memento with all the panelists. To conclude today's proceedings, I would now like to invite Mr. Anant Kumar, Director G20, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Anurag. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished delegates, a very good evening to all of you. Now, as we have come to an end of this insightful event regarding green hydrogen, I would like to take some time and summarize the proceedings today, and also express our gratitude to everyone who has made this possible. It was a pleasure to hear from our colleagues from other G20 nations on the commitments for decarbonization through green hydrogen, and also our international partners from research and academia for presenting the potential opportunities we can harness by advancing the green hydrogen. Your participation has been instrumental in making this event a huge success, and we hope to continue working together towards a sustainable future. I would also take this opportunity to thank Mr. Bhupender Singh Valla, Secretary MNRE, for his support and guidance in making this event successful. I would also like to appreciate our esteemed speakers, panelists, and delegates who have shared their valuable insights and knowledge on your suggestions to accelerating adoption of green hydrogen. Your presentations and discussions have been enlightening and thought-provoking, and we are thankful for your time and efforts. I would also like to extend our heartfelt thanks and congratulations to all my colleagues at the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, G20 Secretariat, Solar Energy Corporation of India, International Solar Alliance, and WRI India for their support and cooperation in organizing this event. Your contributions have been instrumental for planning and executing this event. Lastly, I would like to thank all the participants for their active participation and taking out time on a Sunday evening to attend the discussions. Your enthusiasm and interest towards the green hydrogen transition for combating climate change is highly appreciated. Thank you. Now, before we end this session, I would like to make one or two housekeeping announcements. For all the G20 delegates from G20 countries, invited countries, and international organizations, we would be moving to Hotel Leela, and from there we would be going to excursion to Gift City. And on our way back from Gift City, we would be visiting Dandi Kutir, and there would be a leisure show over there for 30 minutes. And then after that, we will have our dinner, welcome dinner. And I would request all of the participants to join us for the high tea outside the main hall. Thank you. Thank you.